This is the line in the sand. If you live in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, or any of the dozens of cities and states that have refused to turn local police into federal deportation squads, tomorrow your city might wake up broke. February 1st, 2026. That's the date circling on the calendar of every mayor, every governor, every city budget director in Blue America this morning, because President Donald Trump just declared economic war on sanctuary cities, and this time he says he means it. During a rambling speech at the Detroit Economic Club last week, the president made a threat that has sent shockwaves through municipal governments across the nation. Starting February 1st, he announced, we are not making any payments to sanctuary cities or states having sanctuary cities. They do everything possible to protect criminals. At the expense of American citizens, it breeds fraud and crime and all of the other problems that come. So we are not making any payment to anybody that supports sanctuary cities. Let that sink in. The President of the United States just threatened to financially strangle cities representing over 100 million Americans. He's threatening to cut Medicaid. He's threatening to cut education grants. He's threatening to cut disaster relief. He's threatening to cut infrastructure funding. He's threatening to cut everything. And when reporters asked him exactly what funding he planned to withhold, his answer was chilling in its vagueness. You'll see, he said, it'll be significant. But here's what the mainstream media isn't telling you. The mayors aren't scared, they're furious. And they have 3 words for Donald Trump. See you in court. In this exhaustive deep dive, we are going to break down the constitutional crisis unfolding as you watch this. We are going to show you why the courts have already slapped down this exact power grab twice before. We're going to reveal the staggering dollar amounts at stake, the billions that could evaporate from city budgets overnight, and we are going to explain why legal experts are calling this the most flagrant violation of the spending clause since the New Deal era. The president thinks he can rule by financial blackmail. America's cities are about to teach him a civics lesson. Let's start with what sanctuary city actually means, because the administration is deliberately muddying the waters. A sanctuary city is not, despite what Stephen Miller screams on Fox News, a city that protects criminals. It is not a city that harbors murderers. It is not a city that obstructs justice. A sanctuary city is simply a jurisdiction that has decided that local police officers should focus on local crime, not federal immigration enforcement. That's it. That's the whole thing. When a city declares itself a sanctuary jurisdiction, it typically means one or more of the following. Local jails won't hold people past their release date just because Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, asks them to without a warrant. Local police won't ask about immigration status during routine stops. City resources won't be used to help federal agents conduct immigration raids. This is not lawlessness. This is federalism. This is the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution in action, the same amendment that conservatives claim to worship until it protects immigrants. The legal principle is simple. The federal government cannot commandeer state and local resources to enforce federal law. The Supreme Court has ruled on this repeatedly, in Prince v. United States in 1997, in New York v. United States in 1992. The federal government can enforce its own laws with its own agents. It cannot force states and cities to do its job for free retrospectively. But Donald Trump doesn't care about constitutional principles. He cares about punishment. He cares about making an example. And he has picked a fight with cities that have the money, the lawyers, and the political will to fight back. Let's talk about who's on the chopping block. The Department of Homeland Security maintains what they call a sanctuary jurisdiction list. As of October 31st, that list includes 18 cities and 12 states: New York, Illinois, California, Minnesota, Colorado, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Oregon, Vermont, Washington. We're talking about states and cities that represent the economic engine of America. We're talking about jurisdictions that send far more money to Washington than they receive back, and Trump wants to cut them off. New York City alone receives approximately $25 billion in federal funding annually. That's not a typo. $25 billion that covers Medicaid for millions of residents, that covers Section 8 housing vouchers for hundreds of thousands of families, that covers school lunch programs for over 1 million children, that covers infrastructure projects, disaster preparedness, law enforcement grants, anti-poverty programs. The president is threatening to pull the rug out from under one of the largest economies in the world. Chicago expects about $200 million in direct federal aid this fiscal year, but the ripple effects are far larger. The federal funding for transit, for housing, for healthcare, for education. Mayor Brandon Johnson didn't mince words in his response. We will be relentless, he declared. until we restore every dollar that has been withheld by the Trump administration. Those are funds that belong to the people of Chicago, not the president. To the president, our message is simple. We will see you in court. See you in court. That's not just political rhetoric. That's a promise backed by precedent. Because here's the dirty secret the White House doesn't want you to know. They've tried this exact same scheme twice before, and twice before they've been humiliated in federal court. Let's go back to 2017. 5 days after his first inauguration, Trump signed an executive order that purported to strip federal funding from sanctuary jurisdictions. It was red meat for the base. It was a show of strength. And it was flagrantly unconstitutional. San Francisco and Santa Clara County sued immediately. The case landed before U.S. District Judge William Orrick in the Northern District of California. Judge Orrick didn't just rule against the administration. He eviscerated them. The executive order was unconstitutional before the ink was even dry, San Francisco City Attorney Dennis Herrera said at the time, and Judge Orrick agreed. In November 2017, he issued a nationwide injunction blocking the order. The reasoning was straightforward. The president cannot unilaterally withhold funds that Congress has appropriated. Only Congress has the power of the purse. The president can ask. The president can lobby. The president cannot simply decree that money appropriated for one purpose will be withheld because a city refuses to help enforce immigration law, the administration appealed. In 2018, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the ruling. The executive branch, the court wrote, cannot refuse to disperse grants to San Francisco and Santa Clara County without congressional authorization. Game over. Round one goes to the cities. But Trump didn't learn. He never learns. His second term has been a masterclass in repeating the same mistakes at higher volume. In February 2025, just weeks after his second inauguration, he signed another executive order with the Orwellian title ensuring taxpayer resources are not used to incentivize or support illegal immigration. In April, he signed yet another order threatening to prosecute sanctuary cities and cut their funding. The legal challenges began immediately. San Francisco, Santa Clara County, and a coalition of other jurisdictions filed suit again. They asked Judge Orrick, the same judge who blocked Trump in 2017, for a preliminary injunction, and in August 2025, Judge Orrick ruled against the administration again. He called the funding threats a coercive threat. He called them unconstitutional. He issued an injunction blocking the cuts. The Trump administration appealed. The case is still pending. And now, with February 1st approaching, the president is threatening to ignore the courts entirely and cut the funding anyway. This is not normal governance. This is authoritarian theater, and the mayors of America's largest cities are calling his bluff. Let me read you what New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani said to reporters last week. It is worth quoting in full. There are many threats that are made to New York City on a regular basis, and I am confident in our city's ability to fight those threats back. We've seen, whether it be in the courts or whether it be beyond that, our ability to win those fights. Notice the calm confidence. Notice the lack of panic. Mamdani isn't scared because he knows the law is on his side. He knows the courts have already ruled on this question. He knows that Trump is threatening something he almost certainly cannot legally do. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker was even more direct. We have successfully challenged the administration in court before, and we are prepared to continue doing so. That's not a man worried about losing. That's a man who has already won this fight once and is ready to win it again. But here's where it gets interesting. The Trump administration knows the courts will likely block a blanket funding cut. They've lost that fight twice, so they're trying a different approach. They're trying to death by 1,000 cuts. Instead of withholding all funding in one dramatic gesture, they're quietly squeezing cities through discretionary grants. The Department of Homeland Security announced in April that it would reject grant applications from jurisdictions that don't commit to cooperating with ICE. This includes Federal Emergency Management Agency grants, FEMA grants, the money cities use to prepare for hurricanes and earthquakes and pandemics. The message is clear. Help us deport people, or when disaster strikes, you're on your own. Cities from Oregon to Connecticut have sued over these conditions. A federal judge in Seattle issued a preliminary injunction blocking the restrictions in August. The legal war is being fought on multiple fronts, and at every front, the cities are winning. So what happens tomorrow? What happens on February 1st when Trump's deadline arrives? Let me walk you through the scenarios. Scenario 1. The administration actually tries to withhold funding. This would trigger immediate emergency litigation. Cities would file for temporary restraining orders within hours. Given the existing precedent, given Judge Orrick's August ruling, given the Ninth Circuit's 2018 decision, courts would almost certainly issue injunctions. Blocking the cuts, the money would keep flowing. Trump would rage on Truth Social about activist judges. His base would cheer the fight, but the actual policy impact would be zero. Scenario 2. The administration quietly backs down. They announce that they're reviewing the policy. They say they're targeting specific grants rather than all funding. They spin the retreat as strategic patience. This is the most likely scenario because the White House knows it cannot win this fight in court, but backing down means looking weak, and Donald Trump would rather lose in court than look weak in advance. Scenario 3. The administration targets discretionary grants only. This is the middle path. The president can't touch money that Congress has specifically appropriated, but there are billions in discretionary grants where the executive branch has more latitude. The problem with this approach is that it's slow, it's complicated, and it still faces legal challenges. Cities have already sued over grant conditions. They'll sue over any new restrictions too. Scenario 4. Constitutional crisis. The president ignores the courts entirely. He orders the Treasury Department to stop payments regardless of injunctions. This would be an unprecedented assault on the separation of powers. It would trigger impeachment calls from Democrats and uncomfortable silence from Republicans. It would force the Supreme Court to intervene. And even this conservative Supreme Court, even with its deference to executive power, would likely recoil at such a flagrant violation of basic constitutional structure. Let me be clear about what's at stake here. This isn't just about immigration. This is about whether the President of the United States can use federal funding as a weapon to punish political opponents. If Trump can strip funding from cities that don't cooperate with his immigration agenda, what's next? Can he strip funding from states that allow abortion? Can he strip funding from cities that have strict gun laws? Can he strip funding from jurisdictions that voted against him? The spending clause exists for a reason. It prevents the executive branch from becoming a dictator with a checkbook. It ensures that federal money flows according to law, not according to presidential whim. Trump is testing whether that guardrail still holds. The Democratic response has been fierce. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries issued a statement calling the funding threat economic terrorism against American cities. Senator Elizabeth Warren called it unconstitutional blackmail. Senator Chuck Schumer said the president was trying to hold hostage the most vulnerable Americans, children who need school lunches, families who need housing, seniors who need health care, all to score political points against immigrants. But here's what's really interesting. The Republican response has been muted. The senators from states on the sanctuary list are notably quiet because they know their constituents depend on federal funding too. They know that if Trump actually follows through, their phone lines will melt with complaints from mayors and county commissioners and school superintendents and hospital administrators. They're hoping this blows over. They're hoping the courts handle it. They don't want to defend the indefensible, but they don't want to cross Trump either. Let's talk about the human cost. Because behind the legal arguments and the political theater, there are real people whose lives hang in the balance. Consider Maria, a hypothetical but representative case. She's a legal permanent resident in Chicago. She has a green card. She pays taxes. She works as a nurse at a public hospital that receives Medicaid funding. If Trump cuts funding to Illinois, that hospital faces layoffs. Maria might lose her job, not because she did anything wrong. Not because she violated any law, but because the president wants to punish her city for not helping him deport her neighbors. Consider James, a veteran in San Francisco who relies on federally funded homeless services. He served in Afghanistan. He came home with PTSD. He fell through the cracks. Now he's getting back on his feet with help from programs that receive HUD funding. If Trump cuts that funding, James is back on the street, not because of anything to do with immigration, but because the president is using veterans as pawns. Consider the children in New York City public schools who receive free and reduced price lunches through federal nutrition programs. Over 700,000 children depend on those meals. Many of them, these meals are the only reliable nutrition they get. Is Donald Trump really going to take food out of children's mouths to make a political point about sanctuary cities? The cruelty is the point. We've heard that phrase before, but it has never been more applicable than in this moment. The sanctuary city funding threat is designed to cause maximum pain to maximum people in the hope that the suffering will force cities to capitulate. It is hostage taking on a municipal scale. And here's the bitter irony. The policy doesn't even make sense on its own terms. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that sanctuary policies make communities safer, not more dangerous. When immigrants trust local police, they're more likely to report crimes. They're more likely to cooperate with investigations. they're more likely to come forward as witnesses. When immigrants fear that any contact with police could lead to deportation, they retreat into the shadows. Crimes go unreported, criminals go free. A 2017 study by researchers at the University of California, San Diego found that sanctuary policies had no effect on crime rates. Multiple studies have reached similar conclusions. The narrative that sanctuary cities are crime-ridden hellholes is a fiction invented by Stephen Miller and amplified by Fox News. It has no basis in reality. The real reason Trump is targeting sanctuary cities isn't public safety, it's politics. Sanctuary cities are overwhelmingly Democratic. They voted against him. They oppose his agenda, and he wants to punish them for it. This is revenge disguised as policy. Let's talk about what happens in court. The legal framework here is well established. The Supreme Court laid it out in South Dakota v. Dole in 1987. The federal government can attach conditions to federal funding, but those conditions must meet four requirements. First, the condition must be in pursuit of the general welfare. Second, the condition must be unambiguous so states know what they're agreeing to. Third, the condition must be related to the federal interest in the particular national project or program being funded. Fourth, the condition cannot be coercive. It's that fourth requirement where Trump's policy falls apart. A condition becomes coercive when the financial inducement offered by Congress is so significant that it passes the point at which pressure turns into compulsion. The Supreme Court used this standard to strike down part of the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid expansion in 2012. If threatening to cut Medicaid funding for states that didn't expand the program was coercive, then threatening to cut all federal funding to sanctuary cities is coercion on steroids. Moreover, there's a serious Germanness problem. Federal education funding is given to support education. Federal transportation funding is given to build roads. Federal health funding is given to provide health care. None of these programs have anything to do with immigration enforcement. Conditioning them on immigration cooperation violates the requirement that conditions be related to the purpose of the funding. You can't say we'll give you money for school lunches if you help us deport people. The two things have nothing to do with each other. Judge Orrick has already ruled on these exact questions. The cities have already won on these exact arguments. The only question is whether the Trump administration will respect the courts or try to bulldoze through them. Let me tell you what I think happens next. February 1st comes and goes. The administration makes a lot of noise about cutting funding. They issue press releases, they send threatening letters, maybe they hold up a few discretionary grants to make headlines, but the bulk of federal funding continues to flow because the courts have blocked it and because the bureaucratic machinery of government doesn't actually allow for instant funding cuts. The cities file new lawsuits. The cases work their way through the courts. The Ninth Circuit rules against the administration again. The administration appeals to the Supreme Court. And then we find out whether this court, the most conservative court in nearly a century, will uphold basic constitutional principles or give the president the power to financially blackmail states and cities. I'm not optimistic. This court has shown extraordinary deference to executive power when that executive is Donald Trump. They've blessed his travel bans. They've blessed his emergency declarations. They might bless this too, but even if they do, it will take years. And in the meantime, the money keeps flowing. The mayors know this. That's why they're not panicking. That's why they're saying see you in court with confidence rather than fear. They've won this fight before. They expect to win it again. But here's what concerns me. What happens if Trump decides the courts don't matter? What happens if he orders agencies to stop payments regardless of injunctions? We've already seen this administration flirt with defying court orders. We've seen them drag their feet on compliance. We've seen them look for loopholes and workarounds. At some point, the constitutional guardrails only work if everyone agrees to be bound by them. And Donald Trump has made clear throughout his career that he considers rules to be suggestions that apply to other people. The sanctuary city funding fight is a stress test of American democracy. It's a test of whether the courts can constrain an authoritarian president. It's a test of whether federalism means anything. It's a test of whether the spending clause still protects states from presidential extortion. We're about to find out whether the system holds. Subscribe to this channel because tomorrow, February 1st, we'll be monitoring the situation in real time. If the administration actually moves to cut funding, we'll cover it live. If cities file emergency motions, we'll break down the legal arguments. If this escalates into a full constitutional crisis, you'll want to be here. Drop a comment below. Does your city have sanctuary policies? Are you worried about losing federal funding? Do you think the courts will hold? Do you think Trump will try to defy them anyway? And share this video with everyone who needs to understand what's actually at stake. The mainstream media is covering this as a policy dispute. It's not. It's an assault on the constitutional order. It's an attempt to transform the presidency into a protection racket. Pay tribute to the king or lose your funding, the mayors of Americas. Cities are standing up and saying, "No, see you in court. We'll see you in court." That phrase should be the rallying cry of everyone who believes in the rule of law. February 1st is tomorrow. The deadline is here. And the fight for American federalism is about to begin. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because when the next shoe drops, you'll want to know about it immediately. This is the Sanctuary City Showdown, and it's just getting started.